What do Jesus and Einstein have in common? Both Jesus and Einstein challenged prevailing beliefs. Jesus challenged the religious and societal norms of his time, while Einstein challenged established scientific theories and concepts. They both had a profound impact on human history. Jesus is regarded by Christians as a central figure in human history, whose teachings and life have shaped the beliefs and values of millions of people. Einstein's discoveries and theories have fundamentally altered our understanding of the universe and continue to influence scientific progress. Both had a strong sense of purpose. Jesus had a clear sense of his mission to save humanity, while Einstein was driven by a passion for scientific discovery and advancing human knowledge. Both were committed to their respective purposes and pursued them with dedication and determination. Could Jesus have been a genius? In this episode and in the episodes to come, we'll be exploring that issue in greater detail. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to identify a genius. People who are exceptionally gifted in their intellect tend to show signs at an early age. WebMD states that some of the signs of genius in children are intense need for mental stimulation and engagement, desire to explore specific topics in great depth, insatiable curiosity, often demonstrated by many questions, and emotional depth and sensitivity. We are given a glimpse of Jesus' childhood in Luke, where he records, "Every year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the festival, according to the custom. After the festival was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled on for a day. Then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers." To be sure, any kid who would rather spend their day with grown-ups discussing long-winded topics ad nauseum instead of doing what a 12-year-old would otherwise be doing is a kid who needs to be studied further, not to mention when this 12-year-old is able to amaze the rabbis. Now, in those times, the temple was the Hebrew equivalent of the Greek symposium. Israel's brightest minds would come here to engage in all sorts of theological and philosophical issues. Normally, a 12-year-old entering into this space and inserting himself into these debates would not only have been intrusive, but almost an insult to their intelligence. The fact that they not only tolerated him, but were amazed by the things he was saying goes to show that Jesus really captivated the hearts and minds of people, even at his early age. Here were men who studied the scripture for most of their lives, and a little child questioning them. The little child Jesus here is asserting his authority in the house of God and the laws that are being taught. His parents were surprised at the freedom he expressed in this one act of his, not only by becoming independent from his parents' supervision and guidance, but also by publicly speaking at the temple. His mother asks him, "Son, why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been searching for you with great anxiety." Jesus said to them, "Why are you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" But they did not comprehend what he said to them. In this simple answer, Jesus demonstrates his identity. He knows who he is and what his mission on earth is. While his parents may have thought Jesus was lost, he was far from being lost. Jesus always knew where he was and where he was going. He knew his purpose and his goal in life. While you and I might spend our entire lives figuring out our identity, Jesus knew his identity from the get-go. Oftentimes, a prodigy discovers their passion early on in life, while everyone else is doing what children normally do. The prodigy seeks their ultimate passion in life. Somehow, you feel that the piano belongs at your fingertips. You become fixated until you master it. It becomes an obsession until you become an expert. Many times, a prodigy will face resistance from others who try to convince them to focus their attention and energy on different things. However, nothing can separate a prodigy from their true passion. It is the same with Jesus. He knew with great clarity what his purpose in life was all about. He came to us to be the intersection between heaven and earth, between God and human beings. He came to remove the separation between us and the divine, and by doing so, restoring us back to our Creator. This is why when Mary asks for an explanation for his disappearance, Jesus responds by saying, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" It was as if Jesus was saying that if you had known my mission, you would know where I must be. If you were looking for Mozart, you would most likely expect to find him at the piano. If you were searching for Michelangelo, you would probably look for him in the Sistine Chapel. The artist always finds their music, the painter their canvas. The genius always gravitates towards his art as if his life depended on it. Jesus was an exceptional talent who always remained aware of his extraordinary abilities. Unlike many of us who struggle to navigate life's intricacies, even as a young person, Jesus possessed a remarkable clarity of purpose that is rare. He understood the deepest desires of the human heart and possessed the skills to help us achieve them. This was his exceptional ability, and he remained dedicated to it throughout his life. This pivotal moment in the temple marked the beginning of a significant change. The temple was considered the dwelling place of God, and for centuries, wise and devout individuals had dedicated their lives to finding a way to connect with God's presence. Moses, for instance, was known as God's friend and spoke with him face to face. While the ancient prophets could hear his voice, even if in a dream or vision, to these people God was a real, intimate presence, not just an abstract concept. However, by the time Jesus was born, this intimacy had all but vanished. When Jesus visited the temple, it was still the place where God was supposed to meet his people. But 400 years had passed, and there had been no sign of God's presence. The religious leaders had lost faith that anything real lay behind their rituals. They no longer considered God their friend, but rather a distant and fearful ruler. While they used to converse with God in this holy place, now they only discussed him. When Jesus entered the sacred grounds, he was surrounded by people who were afraid to even utter God's name, but he boldly referred to God as his Father. This declaration conveyed a clear message that Jesus was the embodiment of the temple's promise. He represented the convergence of heaven and earth, creator and creation, and divinity and humanity. Essentially, he was the physical manifestation of God on earth. He found himself conversing with individuals who possessed academic knowledge of the scriptures but lacked the wisdom of God, which was a tragic situation. The gospel accounts reveal that these influential men had used the scriptures to support racism and prejudice, promote corruption and avarice, and hold the impoverished and vulnerable hostage by denying mercy to sinners. They had distorted the meaning of the Sabbath and utilized its prohibition on work to withhold kindness from the sick and underprivileged. These men had exploited religion to deceive the sincere, and they believed they were too intelligent to be exposed. Even when he was young, Jesus could see through their falsehoods. Jesus had an understanding of things that he shouldn't have been able to know. According to the Gospel of John, he knew about people's nature and motives without being told. He didn't need the religious leaders to teach him about humanity because he already knew everything about everyone. It was like he could see the hidden side of people, the darkness within them. After 3 days, even the highly educated temple scholars found themselves humbly sitting at the feet of the child. This encounter reveals the true nature of Jesus' brilliance, his ability to connect with people from all walks of life and navigate conflict and controversy. Perhaps the purpose of his divine nature was to restore our human nature. Your own genius is not for personal gain, but for the betterment of others. Genius requires great responsibility, and unlocking it means accepting that responsibility. Jesus didn't come to solve all the world's problems or remove corrupt leaders, but he came to save humanity from itself. This was his purpose. Jesus' genius was not based on the miracles he performed, but rather on his character. He had a unique perspective on life, seeing each moment from an eternal standpoint. He understood what made humans feel alive and fully human, and demonstrated this through his interactions and questions. His confidence in his identity and purpose on earth also reflected his genius. The miracles he performed were simply a product of his divine nature, but his true brilliance was shown in his character and understanding of humanity.